Alright, this is Warhammer 2. Watch this and tell me if you notice anything weird.
We are Sigmar's heirs! Great swords!
Now, if you watched that and thought, Zook, I don't really see anything weird. Well, that's fine, because there wasn't anything weird about this. This is just normal old Total War Warhammer. Now, same thing again, but with Warhammer 3. See if you notice anything.
Moving! Follow the bear!
Did you catch it? If you know the game well enough, or maybe you're just incredibly eagle-eyed, you might have seen how slowly the Warhammer 3 units respond to their orders. Here's a side-by-side comparison. Clicking orders at the same time, you'll notice the Warhammer 2 units move way sooner than the Warhammer 3 ones do. For some reason, the Warhammer 3 units take longer to turn around, they wait, and then they move, rather than just doing it all in one as the Warhammer 2 unit does. Same thing with Demonettes here. But it's a bit of a problem and is a bit confusing on whether it's a bug or a feature, to be honest. For me, it's mostly leading to the game and the battles feeling kind of sluggish, particularly when you're trying to disengage. This is Warhammer 2, this is disengaging with a unit here. You'll see they run away pretty much instantly, it takes a couple of seconds, and then they're off, mostly keeping their formation together as well, with only a few stragglers. So this feels responsive and allows me to keep effectively using the unit. Warhammer 3's turn again with some Kossars. Let's see how they do. So not only do they take ages to actually just turn around and run, they're running in no kind of formation at all. This means when I disengage the unit and try to do something else with them, they're going to be all over the place and not very effective, again leading to the sluggish feel of battles. But I thought, okay, maybe this is just Kossars. They're obviously not like a super high-trained soldier. Maybe they're just supposed to be a little less organized. So I did the same thing with Sargard, who are surely the best of the best in terms of human soldiers. Well, it's better, but still quite messy. They're not holding their formation as well as the Warhammer 2 Empire swordsmen did, who are surely less better trained than the Sargard. But ultimately, it seemed like quality of the unit wasn't anything to do with this, as here's the same thing with Celestial Dragon Guard, who take ages to turn around, ages to move, although they do hold their formation more like the Empire Swordsmen did, but that might be because they have a trait called Formation Attack which makes them stay that way. So besides that this is happening at all, it's also kind of worse because it seems to be affecting different units in different ways. The Kossars respond terribly, the Sargard respond okay. The Celestial Dragon Guard respond differently. These Streltsy here, they're going to take a while to move. So, for some reason, Warhammer 3 is just more unresponsive in battles, and I've found that it's quite frustrating, especially when you're trying to play someone like Cathay, who need their units to reposition and stand still pretty quickly. But for the most part, this is only when you try to turn around and run. Units are still pretty much the same responsiveness as Warhammer 2 if you get them to charge forward, and it only really affects infantry. You can see cavalry there is pretty much the same as Warhammer 2 in terms of responsiveness. So it's an infantry problem. And what's also kind of interesting and kind of funny to look back at is how fast units respond in Shogun 2. Click attack order, instantaneous movement and response, nice organized formation. This meant when you disengage or simply change direction with new orders, the game would do it quickly and effectively, making the units feel responsive and that you were more in control of the army. So it's no secret that Total War battles have kind of slowed down in that sense. Units are less responsive overall, and that's not necessarily a huge deal, but if Warhammer 3 is by design been made more sluggish, I think that's a bad step. We need to be more in control of our armies, not less, right? This kind of stickiness that units have now means that you have to sometimes give the order over and over again to actually get them to fully disengage, otherwise 2 men will get stuck and pull the whole unit back and all that kind of thing. So that's the first issue. Stickiness and unresponsiveness, which isn't consistent across all infantry. Alright, now for another game of Say What You See. Do you notice anything weird about this clip? A bunch of different cavalry charging into infantry. Once again, looks pretty normal, right? This is what we're used to, for the past 4 years at least, in Warhammer 2. What I'm looking at here is how many men have been knocked around by the charge. These demigryphs are obviously pretty chunky, heavy beasts. They are going to knock units around all over the place, so having men scattered around everywhere like this makes sense. The normal cavalry, the Empire Knights here, they've knocked a few boys around, but mostly the Battle Pilgrims have maintained their formation and are able to fight against the Empire Knights. Only a few men have been knocked from their position. And the same thing with the Reichsguard and even heavier cav. They've knocked a few Battle Pilgrims around, but the Pilgrims are still able to maintain their formation and fight effectively against the cavalry. Guess what? Same again, Warhammer 3, 4 different kinds of cavalry, light cavalry, medium cavalry, heavy cavalry, bear cavalry. See what you notice. So you probably clocked that men go flying absolutely everywhere. Their formation is annihilated, and half the unit ends up on the floor. Now, you might expect this from the big, heavy bear cavalry, but even Kossovite dervishes are doing this. They're a light cavalry with leather armor and no horse armor, and they're knocking down Jade warriors who are heavily armored, who have a shield, are supposed to be a strong defensive unit. Granted, they weren't stood still making the most of their bonuses, because that's the AI, but still, they should not be knocked around like this. As I say, you expect this of the bear cav, right? They're massive heavy beasts, like the demigryph. They should be knocking men around everywhere. But dervishes, and even winged lancers, the Griffon Legion actually seemed to be the one which did the least amount of knockdown, even though it's the heaviest horse cavalry. So it just seems like knockdown is pretty overpowered right now and way tuned up, which is probably why the ogres are so strong, is because they just knock all of their infantry on the floor because ogres are massive, massy troops. But it's not just physical things that are making men go flying everywhere. Here's Warhammer 2 again and the penumbral pendulum from the Law of Shadows. Let's see how it does on Silveringard, a pretty sturdy heavy infantry. Swipes through 2 units, and the units are mostly fine. They've taken a bit of damage, a few elves have been knocked around, but they maintain their formation and still are pretty operational. So let's go again in Warhammer 3, Penumbral Pendulum against Celestial Dragon Guard, a similar but even heavier unit than the Silveringard. Let's see what the Pendulum does in this game. Swipes through 1 unit, into a second. Let's have a look. Formation, all over the place. Men have been knocked down everywhere. The formation is mostly gone, apart from the back line of the unit, it seems. But now the unit is much more knocked around all over the place. The same with this one. And it's been no secret in Warhammer 3 that Penumbral Pendulum is incredibly powerful. Too powerful, because it's done half health of both these expensive units, which is way too much, especially compared to Warhammer 2, as we saw just now. But that's fine, that's just a balance issue. Just change a few numbers and you're sorted there. The bigger issue here, I think, is that formations cannot be held by infantry units. They just get knocked around all over the place by everything. And here's another spell as an example. The Lash of Slaanesh against, again, the heavily armored Celestial Dragon Guard. Their formation is absolutely annihilated. And this is especially a problem for Cathay because they're supposed to stand still a lot of the time and get their buffs. So if they were stood there waiting to defend against some incoming Exalted Demonettes, and then you hit them with the Lash of Slaanesh, you knock them around everywhere, and then all their defenses are gone, and then they've got Demonettes all over them, absolutely murdering them. Couple that with the slow responsiveness and how fast that spell goes off, amongst other spells, and Cathay won't even get a chance to dodge it, because they don't really move, and they can't get out of the way quick enough. Alas, just another thing making infantry very ineffective in this game. So, there's a bunch of problems with infantry. They're unresponsive, they're sluggish, and they just get knocked around everywhere by absolutely everything else in the game. Cavalry monsters, single entity monsters, magic, the entire roster of the Ogres faction. What can infantry do to be effective? This is especially a problem for those more ranged factions. Kislev and Cathay, especially Cathay, they have a really hard time at the moment. How are they ever supposed to protect their missiles if their infantries are just all over the floor, all over the place? And what's going to happen when all the old factions come in? Is the Empire going to get knocked around all over the place? How are the Elves going to protect their missiles? There's a few things that need addressing here. But I wanted to bring this issue forward specifically because I think it's one that may go unnoticed under all of the other stuff that is currently wrong with the game. Obviously, Warhammer 3 has had a rocky launch, there's lots of bugs, crashes, people are having really bad performance issues, let alone any balance problems. But unfortunately, that's kind of normal for Total War and games in general nowadays. Rocky starts are pretty common. And do understand this video is not supposed to be any kind of attack on CA. Let us not descend into that kind of foolishness. I'm sure they do the best they can with the resources and time that they have. The only thing I can really say they'd be doing wrong here is if they have, by design, made units somewhat unresponsive for some reason to slow the game down or whatever reason, I don't know. That, I think, would be a big mistake, making things feel more unresponsive. And as I say, I've found battles quite frustrating and somewhat sluggish. It feels hard to use a lot of my infantry effectively, and I think all of the stuff in this video is why. But don't get me wrong, I love Total War Warhammer. I think Warhammer 3 is pretty damn good. It's no doubt going to get way better over the coming months as things get fixed. And of course, when we get the Mortal Empire stuff come in, Warhammer 1, Warhammer 2 factions, the combined map, that's going to be pretty awesome and probably is the experience that everybody is really waiting for. I think the Chaos Realms campaign is good the one time through, but after that, the realms and stuff just become a little bit tedious, and we're just ready for Mortal Empires in the sandbox now. Anyway, I ramble on. I hope you've enjoyed this. Thanks for watching. See you in the future. Get out of here.